Today we are going to talk about the most influential British acts leading up to the American Revolution. So let's get started. How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Virtual History 360. I'm Mr. Wade, and I'm here to help you understand history just a little bit better. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already so that you can keep up with my newer videos that I put out once or twice a week. Also, be sure to check out the awesome history merchandise like masks, phone cases, t-shirts, hoodies found in my Teespring store. If you check it out, there's a link in the description. And be sure to stick around until the end of the video to hear about an event before the Revolution called the Gatsby Affair. But I do not want to get ahead of myself, because today we are going to be focused on the acts that were passed by the British on the North American colonies after the French and Indian War. Now, if you need a refresher, if you need some help with the French and Indian War, you can go ahead and check out this video, found up here, somewhere in that range, right? But just know that you need to know that the British gained a lot of land after the French and Indian War, or the 7 Years' War as they called it in Europe. And of course, the American settlers were eager and excited to move west for better opportunities. The problem is that individuals did not have claims to that land, and the natives were rightly upset, so this ended up leading to Pontiac's rebellion. Once that was put down, the Crown realized they needed to calm the tensions between the two groups, the colonists and the Native Americans. So the Proclamation of 1763 was issued. Now, what the Proclamation of 1763 did was limit the English colonists to only the lands east of the Appalachian Mountains. They couldn't go west of those mountains. These colonists were pretty upset because they realized that Britain gained land and they couldn't use it. Well, this would just be the start of the problems between the England mainland and its North American colonies. Knowing that wars are expensive and realizing that not much money was gained by the victory, England needed to pay off their debts. But their citizens said that the colonists needed to pay their fair share. I mean, the war was fought in North America should pay for it, right? So in 1764, we have the Sugar Act. This put a tax on refined sugars and other imports. It was also designed to stop smuggling, but we'll get to that. The law said that colonists could only buy British goods and that the Crown could seize ships that were carrying illegal goods. So how did the colonists react to this? Well, they started to speak out against British taxation, of course. These early protests are what really got the ball rolling as we move forward in time. After the Sugar Act was repealed, Britain still had war debts to pay, so they passed the Stamp Act. This act required pretty much every printed good to have a special stamp or, some sort of imprint on it to show that the tax had been paid. This again upset the colonists, but instead of just complaining, they actually boycotted or refused to buy British goods with the stamp. This show of force worked and Britain repealed the Stamp Act, but the King and Parliament wanted to make sure the colonists realized and made sure they really knew that they were still under British control. So in 1766, Parliament passed the Declaratory Act, stating that they had the authority to pass laws and tax the colonies in every instance. Really? This really brought the issue to a head, and you really see the argument of no taxation without representation being, I don't want to say used, but it's starting to grow. So the first act to come after the Declaratory Act were the Townsend Acts. Now, the Townsend Acts, they were taxes on a lot of different items such as lead, paint, paper, and the one you probably think of, tea. But it also strengthened the Crown to combat the smuggling of goods. These acts allowed British soldiers to enter into colonists' homes to search for smuggled goods or items. No warrants, no warning, just searching your house. Can you imagine that? Can you see why colonists would be upset by this? Again, colonists protested and it worked. Eventually these acts were repealed. That is, all but the tax on tea. This leads into the Tea Act of 1773. Now, this is where a lot of people get messed up, because the most common response I hear from students is that these colonists were very, very upset because they had to pay so much for their tea now. But that's not actually what happened. The act actually made it illegal to buy tea from anybody that was not the East India Company. So, although the tea was actually cheaper in the colonies than it was in Britain at the time, the colonists did not have a choice as to where to go. And that actually hurt the local merchants. In class, when we get to how the colonists reacted to these British policies, this is that one event that stands out. You know, everyone, I'm sure, has heard of the Boston Tea Party. So we're going to go into greater detail into what happened, but just know today that the next act is a direct result of what happened in Boston, or in the Boston Harbor, I should say. To get Boston to pay for the lost tea, Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, otherwise known as the Intolerable Acts. So here's a list of what they did. They closed Boston Harbor, shutting down their trade. They made meetings among the colonists illegal, and these acts required colonists to house and feed any British soldier that came to their door. These are the British soldiers that were sent over to keep the people of Boston in line. They moved trials from the colonies over to Britain, where either made it impossible to defend yourself if you were a colonist, or impossible to convict if you were a British soldier or a British loyalist. And the acts also moved the Canadian border so colonists could not claim any more land. Maybe now you can see why they were called intolerable? Exactly. It was after this that the Continental Congress was formed, and from here the revolution was just about inevitable. But that's a lesson for another day. What about the Gatsby Affair that I mentioned earlier? Well, the opposition and resistance to these British policies was happening all over, not just in one place. And this is just going to be one example of that. Going back to 1772, a British patrol ship was looking for smugglers, and they gave chase near Newport, Rhode Island. The British ship was called the Gatsby, and it was chasing a ship called the Hannah. And they ended up working their way inland, and they ran ashore in shallow water. When the locals heard about this, they gathered and they burned the ship down to the waterline. It's kind of a big deal, right? But then when the British tried to investigate, they conveniently found that everyone they questioned suddenly had amnesia and had no knowledge or any memory of the event that happened. They didn't even know it happened. So it was just swept under the rug, swept aside, and that was about it. I mean, the committees of correspondence didn't even share the story across the colonies. So that just goes to show you that the acts of rebellion against the British, acts being passed by Parliament were more common than just the big ones that you find in your textbook. Tell you what, leave a comment below telling me what you think of the story of the Gatsby Affair. What about you? Do you know of any other stories of rebellion before the American Revolution? Let me know. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that like button for me. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Turn that red button gray, right? And be sure to check out my other videos like the ones you see to the side over here. I have other history videos. I have US history, I have world history, I even have civics videos. Some of my videos were even shot in 360, so I know you're going to like them. Check them out. Alright, so for Virtual History 360, I'm Mr. Wade. I'll see you next time.